In this tutorial video, we'll show you how you can get started with Lab3 using the starter file you downloaded from the eClass site. So let's make the following assumption. On your desktop, for example, you have I've created the Lab3 folder. Inside, I downloaded this particular zip file from the eClass site. I'm gonna upload it to the Prison account because in order to generate the starter project for ETF for Lab3 and later for the semester end of the semester projects, you will have to use the ETF tool that's available on your Prison account. We do not distribute the ETF tool on other platforms, so you must use that to begin with to generate the starter projects. Okay, assuming you got this zip file already, so we are now going to move on to some FTP program, so which I suggested in your previous lab submission tutorial video. So you have to enter the host, so sftp:/red.eecs.yorku.ca, and then your login name and also your password. And then over here, you can see I choose under desktop, under Lab3. And now you can see I actually get just this file here, which I'm gonna upload in just a moment. Okay, and then I'm gonna say connect. So now this side over here, the right hand side is my remote server, my Red account. So I already created one empty folder there, one folder called 3311.420, and then I created one empty folder in called Lab3. So I'm going to upload the zip file to here. So I'm just gonna right click on the local server, local machine site and say upload. Okay, so you can see now it's now really on my Red server student account over here. So now we're done with the file transfer. So let's now move on to remote labs to really generate the starter projects. Okay, so let's now go on to remote labs, and if you got any doubts about how to connect to remote labs, you can refer to other instructions. So I assume you know how to do that already. I already logged in using my student account into the remote labs. So I'm going to say activities and go to a terminal. Okay, and let me just show you here under my home directory, you can see, remember the 3311.420 and Lab3. And this is the zip file I just uploaded from my local machine. So what I will do is I'm just going to go to CD and then 3311, wherever you store the zip file. F20 and also Lab3. You can see now it's that particular zip file. I'm gonna unzip it first. I'll say unzip and space defender1.zip. Let me do that. Okay, once I'm done, you can see if you open the folder, you can see these are the given artifacts to you to get started with Lab3. And I will show you one by one how you're supposed to get started. Okay, first of all, we're going to generate the starter ETF projects. And by the way, ETF is a new framework you're supposed to use for your Lab3 and also the end of semester projects. And before you actually start with your Lab3, one of the required tasks, as specified in your instruction, is to study the ETF tutorial video. If you haven't done that, I will recommend you do that first before you move on with Lab3. Otherwise, you'll get stuck very soon. Okay, so let's say we have already unzipped the folder over here. So now I'm just going to continue. Okay, let's go back to the terminal and let's simply just type clear over here just to make it clean. And then I'm just going to generate the ETF starter projects. Remember, this is only available on the Prism account. So you can either use a remote lab or you can use the virtual machine to do this. But I think using remote lab would be easier because I'm also going to show you how you can do submission at the end. Let's now run the following command, right? So basically, the important file that's going to allow us to generate the ETF starter project will be this particular grammar file, which you can look at your instruction to see more details. This defines all the abstract user interface events for your game to be developed for Lab3. Okay, I'm not going to go in detail here, but that's the file. So let's first of all see where the current directory is. If I say pwd, you can see we are now only in Lab3, but this particular grammar file is actually inside the space_defender_1 folder. So let's go in there first. CD space defender over here. So that's a folder. You want to go in there. Okay. And then you can see ls. So you can see this is a grammar file we would like to use to generate an ETF starter project. Let's do it. So we'll say ETF-new and then space defender1 grammar.txt. And then we want to generate in the current directory. Don't forget a dot. So that means the current directory. Enter. And then it's going to generate all the artifacts that's necessary for your ETF projects to begin with. So So now you can see many files over here mixed with whatever that was given to you in the starter. So let's do a little bit of rearrangement quickly. Okay, let's do the following. First of all, you can see these files over here, these 3 pairs of the acceptance test. You can see AT001 and also its expected file, AT002 and its expected file, AT003 and also its expected file. Let's move them to the relevant places. We want to move them into, you can see we got tests over here. Under tests, we got acceptance, under which we got instructor. We want to move them all there. So later on, we can run a regression test quite easily. Let's do that. So we're going to say move all the AT files, and then we want to move them into the tests, acceptance, and also instructor. Let's do that. Okay, so once you have done this, you can see if you go under tests, under acceptance, under instructor, you can see all these files have been moved to here. Okay, so later on, if you want to add any of your own test cases, which you should add them under the student folder rather than instructor, right? I will really expect you to really add a large number of acceptance test cases by yourself to do regression testing. Okay, let's go back to this particular folder here. The next thing I want to move would be, I want to move the background chapter for undo redo design pattern, and also all the error and error messages, and also the abstract states. You can see the instruction for more detail. And also for the grammar file, which I also want to move into the docs folder for documentation. Let's do them quickly. Okay, so I'm going to say move messages.txt into docs. Okay, and also move, I want to move OSC2, the undo redo chapter, into the docs, and also to move also the grammar file, the grammar.txt. Sorry, forgot to specify it should be docs over here. Okay, so now once this is done, you can see under the docs folder, we got all these 3 files over here, right? Later on, you will actually add in your bound diagram or your report file here, design documents. Okay, so docs just for all the documentation. Okay, so that's about the rearrangement I would like to do. And now, before we try to compile your generated ETF projects, we need to change something, which will be very important. Okay, so what I will do is I'm going to open up the root class over here, which is under the root cluster. So you can either double click on this, or you can use other editor. But I think on the remote labs, if you simply double click, he's going to use a gedit to open it. So let's just use that option there. Okay. So according to your ETF tutorial videos that you should have studied, according to it, by default, any generated ETF project is going to use a GUI mode over here by default. On the other hand, the command line mode has been commented out by default. However, as I emphasized in the instruction there, when we grade your submission for ETF projects for Lab3 and the eventual projects, we only use a command line mode to grade you. So it is recommended you do not stay with the default GUI mode, even though it might be convenient only in the beginning, but as you build a large number of acceptance test cases, it will not be possible to run them all periodically or constantly using the GUI mode. So I would suggest leave the GUI mode and go to the command line mode right away. Okay, let's do that together. So what I would do is very simple. Go to the first line for the GUI mode, dash dash to put into comments, and then go to second line and then remove the dash dash for the command line show history. Okay, that's the mode we would like to use. So everything is going to be done from the command line. Okay, make sure you save it. Okay, let's close that. So now we have set up the root class also properly. Let's now compile the project just from the command line. Okay, so you can, whenever you want to compile from the command line, this is what you can do. EC, in your ETF tutorial series there, I think the last or second last video talks about how you can do regression testing, especially how do you work on your machine for developments and also run the regression testing against the Oracle, which is only available on the Linux platform remotely. So how do you do that? You can refer to that particular tutorial video in the series. Okay, let's now do this. ET 19.05, that's the most current version, and then minus dash C compile, and then dash freeze. So freeze is more like doing a recompilation from scratch for everything. And then we can say dash config, and now we want to give the ECF file. So now remember, we are now in Space Defender 1. So this is an ECF file, configuration file we want to compile. So you will simply say space _ defender, and then we want to choose .ecf, okay, and then hit enter. So the compilation is going to take a little bit of time. I'm now just going to use the time while it is compiling to give you a little bit of quick walkthrough of other stuff quickly. So I'm going to leave the terminal over here. If you go inside the documents, let's now first of all look at the messages file. Okay, so this file is self-contained. You should really read them through to really know what the abstract states for your Space Defender game should be. Okay, so you will see the answer over there, and also that's about the messages. Okay, about what messages you should really output for the for each intermediate abstract states, and also for the error section over here. So these are what error messages can be triggered by certain commands or events. That's also something you would like to read through, and you should really combine this file together with what's really specified in the instructions in the PDF. Okay. And the second file is, so this is the chapter 21 from the OOSC2, the Object-Oriented Software Construction textbook. So this chapter here talks about how we can solve a particular software engineering problem about undo redo and providing a solution. And the solution actually makes use of polymorphism and dynamic binding. So you can see the instruction about which page you should really pay more attention to about the architecture for the software. And in order to complete this lab, you are required to implement the undo redo pattern in the later phase, but you can look at the instruction for detail. Okay, so this is a background chapter you will have to read. However, let me give you a little bit of warning here. This chapter here was slightly outdated in terms of the syntax it is using. However, given the syntax you actually learned from lab number 0, you should have no problem of translating whatever obsolete syntax in the chapter into the most current one. You should have no problem. But the concept over there is still consistent. Okay, it's not outdated. Okay, the next one I would like to talk about would be the grammar file. So that's something we have looked at already. So you can also always remind yourself what the file is, what the abstract event that you can call. Okay, so now the compilation is done. Let me just go back to the Space Defender folder again. So now let me say clear. Okay, so now if you say ls, basically the ifgens folder now has your executable. Let me show you very quickly. If I say ifgens, and then the project name is Space Defender 1, and then since I say -freeze, so I should go to W code. I only go to F code if there's a finalize, but typically you don't need to go there. So W code, and then Space Defender _1, right? So that's an executable. If you simply do that, over there, it's simply just going to tell you you need to specify a mode over here. For example, I might say -I over here. That's the interactive mode, as you learned from the ETF tutorial video. If I do that, it's actually going to let me interact with the game. Currently, nothing has been done. You can see the system state is simply just default, but you're going to change that by your developments. Okay, let me just quit from there. So you learned already how to do interactive mode from the tutorial video. Okay, let me just quit. Okay, so next I want to show you how you can run regression testing. We try to make things as easy as possible for you, so things just work in the beginning. So in order to run a regression testing, you can go into this particular folder over here. The idea about regression testing, very briefly, a very brief summary, which you learned from the tutorial video. You want to maintain a collection of acceptance tests such that every time you make any small change or small developments, you should always add in more test cases and also run your software against all the collection of test cases. Make sure everything passed. If there's anything that fell, you should really stop your development and try fixing the bug before you move further. So that's the idea about regression testing. You want to go over and over and over. So this is going to be a Python script that's written. So every time you want to run the regression test, you simply run this file. I'll show you in just one moment. And then whenever you want to modify the parameters for the grading script, so this is the file to look at. But I would say, in principle, you don't really have to touch this file. But let's just open that quickly just to show you what you will have to watch out for. Okay, if I go to this particular file, okay, I might need to maybe use gedit over here. So let me just go to gedit. Gedit. Yeah, if you double click, it's going to launch this particular tool over here. That may not be what you want. So let me just use gedit. So gedit regression testing ETF test parameters.py. Okay, let's say that's the one. And let me close this tool, which I don't want. Okay, just close that. Okay, so now let me just open that gedit quickly. So you can see this is the parameters file, and then everything has been set up for you. I want to just tell you something quickly. So you can see everything you add into the instructor and student folder under the tests and acceptance. So which folder am I referring to? You can see under this project folder over here, and then if I go under tests, go under acceptance, so this is the folder, and then I'm adding instructor and also student inside, right? So everything you added there will be included for execution in the tests. It's very different from what you did for ES tests, of course. It's just a different way of thinking about software developments. Okay, and then you don't have to worry about ignore warning, and also it's expected, you should really keep this as false, meaning that since we give you the oracle.exe, that's already some software. You can think about it's more like the executable of the solution. It's just that we didn't give you the source code for the solution. But anytime if you want to know about a particular scenario for the game, you're not too sure what the expected output should be, you can always write the acceptance test yourself and check against the oracle. Okay, that's also something that's specified in the tutorial video. So you can always remain this to be false. And this is simply just the path for the oracle.exe. You can see, so now we are in the, let me just show you again. So you can see if when you're in the regression tests, that's where we are, right? If you go to ... and then you can see oracle.exe is exactly here. Again, this exe executable is only for Linux. If you try to run this on the Windows or Mac, for example, it wouldn't work. Okay, and then finally, you can see this one here is about the program compiled from your developments. So we can simply say ... and go to the ifgens, and this is the path I just explained to you previously, right? So we're just running that whatever. So every time if you make some changes, you will just have to recompile your program. And then once you recompile, this executable here I'm highlighting will be up to date, and then you can run it against the oracle through the acceptance tests. So that will be the flow. Okay, and then every time there's any discrepancy between the actual output produced by your program and the expected output produced by the oracle, and you can use the mail program that's available on Linux on our server. You can use it to compare. I'll show you in just one moment. And that's also the program we used to grade your submission. So make sure you really get the whole process smooth and running. Okay, let me close it. And then, how do I run the regression tests? So currently, of course, everything will fail, but at least you want to make sure everything's running. So what I will do is, I'll simply go to, let's see where I am. I'm now in the, still in the project folder, Space Defender 1. So I'll cd into regression testing. Okay, let me go there, and now let me just clear. So now you can see I got the parameter file, which I just explained to you. What I want to run is the regression test script. So /etf test.py Python. If you do that, it's actually now going to execute the grading script. And now you can see this is what you're expecting to see. It is saying that so far, let me just help you read that quickly. It's actually quite straightforward. It is saying that it has run 3 test cases. You can see this is the first one. So where do they come from? They simply come from basically over here. You see under the tests acceptance instructor AT001.txt. So this is one of the starter tests that we gave to you. AT001, AT002, and also AT003. They all come from the instructor. Currently the student folder is simply just empty, but I'm going to add them gradually. And then over here you can see, and then output produced by, so this is the compiled version from the current program. Apparently it's only the generated version, the starter one, so it's not doing anything useful. That's why they all fail. So now how do we compare the output? Let me just show you one more thing. Okay, so now if I go back to, let me just make this a little bit smaller. If I go back to this folder here, let's again go into regression testing. You can look into the log. The log over here, again, because we were running the instructor's acceptance test, so we got instructor here. And now you can see actual versus expected. So these are the 2 files you want to be careful. For acceptance test number 1, actual file is produced by your program, the ifgens. And the expected file is produced by the oracle. You can think about this is the expected one. So you want to compare this against this. Currently, none of them match. So how do we check that? You can see where we already got the line over here for you to copy and paste. So you can simply say copy the first line, and then you can say paste over here. and then it's going to launch the melt program here. You can see on this side, it is the expected. So this is the output produced by the Oracle. So this is something you're supposed to produce by your program. But currently, you can see on the actual side, it's not doing anything useful. You can see it simply say the default model state, for example, for every one of them. So that's why they are not identical, which is expected. So eventually, before you when you submit your Lab3 project for grading, you should make sure every possible scenario you can think about, not just the 3 test cases we gave to you, is only a starting point. You want to make sure every scenario you can think of, you always match your output against the Oracle output. They are identical, character by character. If there's only a comma or even a period difference, you will still be considered as a failure for that particular test. So you got to be careful. Okay, let's close this over here, and then I want to show you one more thing. Okay, so here we're only just doing the instructor test. How do you add your own test cases? Let me just fake it quickly. Let's say I just want to go to my folder again, go into tests, go to acceptance, and go to instructor over here. Okay, so now let me just copy this file. Let me say copy, and let me go to acceptance and go to students. Let's say for you, you're supposed to create as many test cases as you can. Let me just paste this, pretending that that's mine. Okay, and then let me just make it a little bit more straightforward. Let me say, so we really got 1, 2, and 3. What about we say that's AT004, even though it's the same, but that's okay. As soon as I've added this, you don't need to do anything else. Basically, you want to run the acceptance test again. What you will do is it's going to run your ifgen program again on this acceptance test file and generate the actual file. And then it's going to run the Oracle.exe on this file and generate the expected file and compare them. Let's try. So now if I run the regression test over here again, if I run this, so that means now rather than having only 3 test cases, I got 4. If I do that, let's try. You can see we got 4, even though none of them passed, which is normal, right? So what you should do is you should really try to add, as you're developing your game for Lab3 and eventually the projects, you want to do as many test cases as possible under the student folder from day 1 or from day 2, right? Okay, so that's about how to run the regression test cases. So now let's do the final step. I want to show you how you can do submission, which is also very easy. Okay, so now you can see currently we are now here. Let me just go back to our folder here. You can see this is our parent folder, right? So this is where we actually generate the ETF project, right? Every time, let's say I'm now ready to submit, let's say, first of all, eClean, the current folder is going to remove the ifgens. Okay, it's going to remove it. Okay, the ifgen has been removed. If you actually include the ifgen, the submission will take longer, which is not what you want. Okay, so now how do we submit? So you want to make sure your current directory actually contains the Space Defender 1, the startup folder. Okay, so now be careful with this step. Okay, otherwise you'll fail the basic check. Remember, the Lab3 folder contains the archive file, and then this is the folder that was unzipped. You should really go to current directory, should be go to this level here, and then try to submit. Rather than a common mistake is when you actually go in here and try to submit only the Space Defender 1 folder here. That's wrong. Okay? You're gonna get 0 if you submit this wrong. Be careful. Okay, so I'm gonna go to Lab3. Okay, so I'm just let's say the current folder is simply inside Lab3 Space Defender 1. Let me say cd ... Okay, so now you can see I do have the Space Defender 1 that I can submit, right? So now let's do it. You would say submit 3311 Lab3 here, and then you can put the folder name Space _ Defender _ 1, and then I can simply enter, and then it's going to submit. You can see it's now doing some basic checks, and while it is doing it, let me just see if there's anything else I would like to mention to you. Okay, let me just go to Lab3 and go to this folder over here. Okay, again, you want to please make sure the only 2 places you should touch for your developments in principle. Number 1, if you go into Space Defender 1, and number 1 will be definitely the model. Initially, it's basically empty. So as we specify in the tutorial video, you should really try to develop, try to apply modularity principle. You should really try to decompose your solution into different classes and etc. Model will be the first place, and then the second place will be under Abstract UI, under user commands, so these are the command classes that you have to touch in order to deal with the user inputs and output errors if possible. So these are the two places you want to touch. Okay, let me go back to the home folder over here, and then under the tests, you can see under acceptance, you want to add as many as you like into the student folder. Okay, and then let's see if there's anything else. You can see the submission still going on. You just have to wait. It might not show any intermediate messages over here, but just doing compilation. Please just be patient. Okay, and then you want to see under the root.e. Let me just mention once more, which is really important. You want to make sure from day one of your Lab 3, try to stay away from the GUI mode over here. You want to start with the command line mode right away, because number one, this is how we're going to grade your submission. You want to get used to it. Number two, you cannot run automated regression testing using the Python script I showed to you by using GUI mode. So I want to make sure. And when you submit your projects, you also have to make sure this is really the line that's actually being removed the comments. Otherwise, you also fail the basic checks. Okay, so now the basic check is now done. You can see this is not surprising. You simply say, let me just make it bigger. You simply say, you actually run the 3 acceptance tests on our submitted code. You can see AT001, AT002, AT003. They will run as a basic check. Of course, when we grade you, there are some other additional test cases that we're going to run. But since you are given the oracle, so you definitely can, it's a fair game. You're going to come up with as many scenarios on your own as possible and check them against the oracle. If you can be consistent with oracle for as many scenarios as possible, it's much more likely you will get higher marks for the Lab 3 and also same rule for the projects. Okay, so now you can see I failed some basic checks, but at least everything compiles. It only showed that the initial development doesn't pass any test cases. That makes sense. Okay, so that's about how you can submit. You should really try to submit as often as you can just to back up your work. Okay, so that's about the how you can get started with Lab 3. So what should you do now? So now, if you want to work with the remote labs, you can now go to those 2 locations and launch Eiffel Studio to add this project and try to build from develop from there. Or you can try to download this particular startup project into your home machine and try to develop from there. Every time you want to run the regression tests, since it requires the oracle, you have to use remote labs, as I explained in the tutorial video. Okay, that's about it. So good luck to Lab 3, and then if you got any trouble or want to report any issues about oracle, just post on the eClass forum.